Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to Kallipolis Radio. Today, I'll be reading another short story by Nicholas Leonard. This one is titled Antigua. Before we begin, I'd like to thank our channel members Joshua Anolik, Torritz, Catherine McMillan, Dink Smallwood, Ronnie Limestone, and our newest member, Dapper Clown. If you're interested in joining the channel, you can find more information linked in the description below. Thanks for listening. Que armaria la arco de Santa Catalina es. That's what Mr. Skeleton says. He mistook me for a tourist when I met him in the backyard of the Sienna Luz Cafe. Ahem. Maybe I should start with my name, Cillian Norton. I was a student studying Spanish, or trying to study Spanish, in Antigua, Guatemala. I had been in the city for almost a year, approaching the end of my second semester abroad, and I was failing all of my classes. The backyard of the Sienna Luz Cafe is quaint. The backside of the building creates a peninsula with the 3 yellow walls of the building caging you in. There's a patio on each side of the wall with tables and chairs and white pillars that hold up the canopy. There's a bookshop inside and indoor dining areas, but I usually studied in the backyard. Other students sometimes brought their laptops out back and typed away. Sometimes there would be a tourist on their phone, sometimes a waitress would sit there and think. The backyard of Sienna Luz was crowded the day that I met Mr. Skeleton. It was a sticky 77 degrees. Locals, students, and tourists occupied most of the tables, and it made me pause when I first stepped outside with my orange textbook and a cold brew with extra milk. I think destiny saved the seat beside Mr. Skeleton. He was in a creamy white suit with gray, slicked-back hair, combed and trapped under some kind of wet product. I could only see the back of his head then, and see how perfectly tailored the collar was upon his neck. Too shy to ask if the seat was taken, I just put my cold brew and textbook down on the table, pulled back the chair, and sat down. Que amaria la arco de Santa Catalina es, he said. His voice was nasally, with a hint of old-timey Brooklyn accent. I'm sure you've already seen it. It's only a 3-minute walk away from here. How yellow the arch of Santa Catalina is? I queried. So, you speak Spanish well. I'm failing my classes, I said, fidgeting in my seat as a waitress brought a teacup of espresso down in front of my new friend. You're in Antigua, he complained. Then he thanked the waitress. Ever since I forewent alcohol, I've developed a thing for caffeine, he said after taking a sip that made him cringe. Espresso shot. I surveyed him. He had a yellow tie that went hiding into the rest of his suit. I didn't know how he could wear a whole suit in this climate. I didn't know how there wasn't a bead of sweat on his face. He had froggy eyes, vampiric cheeks, and wrinkles that looked more like gills. I haven't seen you here before, I said, even though as he sat as if the place belonged to him. What are you doing here? Blending in. There was a pause so detrimental that I didn't dare open up my Spanish textbook. I knew it wouldn't help me anyway, until finally he spoke. Let me buy you a slice of lemon cheesecake, he said, finessing his wallet instead of a handkerchief out of his chest pocket. I saw it on the menu inside. Can you read the menu, young man? It's in Spanish. I know cafe and I know leche, I squeaked. The waitress hurried back after seeing that my new friend got out his wallet. Something, por favor is what he mumbled to her, and she hurried away. I was amazed with what ease he used the language with. You can call me Mr. Skeleton. What's your name, young man? Cillian Norton. We shook hands, with his hand being cold when I thought it would have been clammy from the heat. In fact, his hand was cold the way that a doctor's hand sometimes is, like it was previously washed. So, what brings you to Antigua besides just blending in? I asked. Let's just wait for your cheesecake, young man. So we did. I didn't open up my textbook, though maybe I should have. His extreme contentedness unnerved me, though I'll never know why. So tell me, how exactly are you failing your classes? The honest answer, sir, is that I don't know. And how are your pedagogues? I dropped the word out of my mouth. Pedagogues? Sir? Teachers. What are your teachers like? He emphasized, and I could tell that he hated having to use the word like for some reason. They're actually very good, I explained. Professora Manzo is very good. If she's good, then why are you struggling? Because I'm not, sir, I said, feeling like a little mouse. I only explained further because he was silent. Sometimes we have these worksheets with crossword puzzles on them. The clues are in English, but the answers are in Spanish. See, my Spanish is so bad that even when I get the right word, I end up drawing extra boxes in the crossword puzzle to make my answers fit. Professora Manzo lets me do this, but on the quizzes and the tests, I can't draw extra boxes on those, you see. The waitress swooped in with the grace of a servant during the Be Our Guest song in Disney's Beauty and the Beast, and swooped away all the same, leaving a plate with a slice of cheesecake behind. The slice consisted of something crossed between Jell-O and Roman limestone. Brilliant yellow, almost white. It smelled like cold lemons and vanilla, too. Mr. Skeleton spoke while bringing his little cup of espresso to his mouth. I'm in Antigua to find my missing grandson. He sipped his espresso. Is he lost? He may have lost his way. Well, what's your grandson doing in Antigua? Mr. Skeleton almost chuckled to himself, but didn't, instead opting to make what might have been a sly attempt at sarcasm. Something tells me he's brushing up on his Spanish. Brushing up on a woman named Maria, to be exact. I felt my eyebrows lean forward, squinting on the horizon of his face in search of understanding. He ignored the inquiry in my eyes and waved down the waitress who came and took his little teacup. Otro, por favor, he said. I took a bite of my cheesecake, and the coolness and the sweetness made the daytime heat a little more bearable. It was refreshing, in fact, and I was glad that Mr. Skeleton had ordered it for me, because had I tried ordering it myself, they might have returned with a plate of deep-fried centipede instead. Maria is a 28-year-old art teacher who lives in Guatemala. My grandson Kendrick is a 20-year-old numbskull who decided to come here and try and win her heart. Kendrick's parents have full-time jobs, and they're taking advantage of me being retired. And here I am, trying to find my runaway grandson in a country in which he doesn't know the people or the language or the history. But you do? Just the language, Mr. Skeleton said. The waitress swooped past, leaving another teacup of espresso on the table. But I also know that chasing older women who live in different countries is not the smartest thing to do. But does she like him back? I didn't get the impression from him that she does, given how his letter claimed he was going to, quote-unquote, win her heart. How the hell did they meet? On some app. And you tell me this why, Mr. Skeleton? Because you asked me, he answered with agitation nearly escaping the shifting tectonics of his teeth. And then he told the truth. And I want help. If I'm going to find a dumb young man, I'm going to need to think similarly to a dumb young man. I noticed how he avoided using the word like in that sentence, when I should have noticed that he was calling me dumb. Maybe. And you are going to help me because I am going to tutor you, he said, then saying the same sentence in Spanish as to prove just how good he was at speaking it. And how elegantly Mr. Skeleton had said it. What? He exclaimed after seeing how much his Spanish had affected me. He took out a cigar from his pocket, popped it in his mouth, and said, You ought to listen to more Carlos Baute and Selena, young man. He watched me try to draw an extra box for the crossword puzzle with my eyes. I heard the subtle sizzle of his cigar, brown paper being burned into delicate sound. He popped the cigar out of his mouth, sending its smoky fragrance my way as he went, Shakira? Whenever, I moped, to which he shrugged and said, I was thinking more of Estoy aquí. He was able to read my expression too fast. You don't know that song? He said, pausing to sip from his teacup of espresso. How do you expect to speak the language without listening to the music or reading their poetry? How do you think I learned? Pablo Neruda. Songs like Celito lindo. I even got a book about the architecture of Spain and started there. He stopped to take a drag on his cigar. Eat your cheesecake, Kenny. I noticed this mistake, but I decided not to remind him that my name was Cillian. Mr. Skeleton paid our bill, and a few minutes later we were walking away from Siena Luz and turning the corner onto Fifth Avenue North. His cigar was halfway smoked, but the smell was haunting both of us. All I had was my textbook, while my new friend had all this mystery and grandiose elegance to him. The suit, the cigar, the knowledge of the Spanish language, which I didn't possess. I want you to imagine just how easily this man walked, how he turned that corner onto Fifth Avenue North, as if the country was a business prospect, and he had just enough means to buy it. Even though I had been in Guatemala for some time, the arch of Santa Catalina always amazed me and quieted my soul. It didn't matter what language one spoke, beautiful architecture is beautiful architecture. But Mr. Skeleton looked ahead at it as if there used to be something greater there before. Had the espresso and cigar made him too nonchalant? Was he busy worrying about his runaway grandson? Fifth Avenue North was a long, long, long pedestrian street with colonial architecture with vanilla white and yellow exteriors and caged windows, and Floridian shingles. But there was also the occasional stonish building overgrown with vines, while the other buildings flourished in their pastel colors. This avenue had a couple of tourists and locals on it. They were somewhat easy to tell apart, as the tourists marveled while the locals had a nonchalant aura. The arch of Santa Catalina was a large yellow archway bridging the rows of buildings on the avenue together. It had a stout clock tower and white cornice. It was as if the buildings came into existence only to prey at the ankles of this great yellow thing. It seemed almost sentient with its cyclops clock, but Mr. Skeleton and I were too far away to tell the time. "Que armaria la arco de Santa Catalina es?" Mr. Skeleton said with a hint of boredom. He sought remedy in another drag of his cigar. I think I spoke because I wanted to impress him. That was made so that the nuns could cross the street without being seen back in the day. It connected a convent to a school or something, I think. Were the nuns really that ugly? He asked me, and I would have chuckled had the arch of Santa Catalina not rendered me speechless. Speechless. Speechless even so far away. Well, Cillian Norton, Andale. And he walked forward, an invisible leash bidding me follow him. We walked down the cobblestone street. The both of us took very languid steps, me because I was in understandable awe at the archway, Mr. Skeleton probably because he felt tranquilly energetic already. I wondered if I had this pristine old man's confidence and charm, if I could pass just at least one Spanish quiz. Professor Manzo would go, "Where'd you learn that, Cillian?" And I would go, "From Mr. Skeleton, of course." We approached the archway and the shadow that it casted, a blacked-out rainbow on the cobblestone street, the darkest thing on Fifth Avenue North. Here, Mr. Skeleton stamped out the snub of his cigar. "It's yellow like your tie," I said, after looking up at the archway, yellow as hollandaise sauce. "A man dresses for occasion," he said to himself, then addressed me. "But something tells me that's where my grandson and I differ." And he stepped into the shadow of the arch, walking forward until he was underneath. I followed him after a moment's hesitation caused by the wonder of the avenue. I realized later on that Mr. Skeleton's nonchalant attitude that didn't feel appropriate on Fifth Avenue North was his way of taking respite before what he foresaw to be a taxing thing, finding the titular Maria. And he passed underneath the arch of Santa Catalina he passed underneath the arch of Santa Catalina the way you'd walk through a portal. He walked the way a general may if said general was exhausted of military bearing, and now just walked as languidly as he pleased. None of the tourists or locals cared how he walked, and he seemed to feed off of this. After telling campus security that Mr. Skeleton was my uncle, they allowed him to stay in my dorm with me. My roommate, a young man from Germany who already spoke 3 other languages, was sleeping in his girlfriend's dorm most of the time anyway, so it worked out. Mr. Skeleton never slept. He stayed true to his promise and kept me up all night, going, "Sleep? You can sleep when you're old. I thought you wanted me to teach you Spanish." He completed a couple of the crossword puzzles Professora Manzo gave my class. She was going to be suspicious when I handed those in with no extra boxes drawn on them. He did these crossword puzzles while I paced in the tiny dorm, repeating what he was telling me to repeat. He made me repeat everything 3 times, and what I was repeating were sentences in Spanish. He listened with half interest, paying attention like the worst babysitter in the world. And I didn't really know if I was improving because all that I got for feedback was, "Your pronunciation is good," and "good again." But at least I was learning Spanish. And there was a barbecue scent in the night, every night, that crept in through the window from the street below. Mayan ghosts were outside, eavesdropping, listening to me speak the language of their conquerors and colonizers. I actually started speaking more Spanish than English because of Mr. Skeleton. I attended my classes during the day, during which I had no clue how Mr. Skeleton was entertaining himself. I suggested, one day after class, that we try to find Maria before we tried to find Kendrick. Instead, he had already found Maria himself. So, we started going from elementary school to elementary school in Antigua, relying on taxi drivers and directions from locals. A great opportunity for me to practice my Spanish in real time, because he made me ask for directions and he made me chit-chat with the taxi drivers. I'm pretty sure most of these locals and taxi drivers had a good grip on the English language, but there was a suggestive atmosphere to Mr. Skeleton and I. I think it seemed to them that he was my superior, who was punishing me by making me speak Spanish, for I did notice a sternness in his gaunt face in these moments. Mr. Skeleton also made me address the security staff of every elementary school we went to. It was awkward when they did let us peruse the halls in search of an art classroom, only for us to find out that the teacher inside wasn't Maria, and definitely was not 28 years old. It was a very old lady. The second elementary school we tried was in a seedy part of Antigua. That elementary school didn't have an art class at all. "Those children have a real promising future," Mr. Skeleton had said when we were exiting the school. I had known him long enough to know that, despite how stiff and agitated he had sounded saying that, he had said it to be sarcastic. When we had covered every elementary school in Antigua, we got desperate and started reaching out. This to no avail. It started interfering with my school attendance, but I wasn't too threatened by it because our nightly lessons resumed. "Are we sure that Maria even exists?" I asked one night, while we had just finished eating dinner in a seedy roadside diner in Jocotanago. "My grandson isn't that crazy," Mr. Skeleton said, while seemingly pulling a cigar out of thin air. "The coffee in there was horrible." "I can't believe you had it this late." "Actually, I can." We carried on the next morning. We went through a town called San Lucas Zacatepeques, and went from school to school, there again to no avail, and ended up in Guatemala City around 1 o'clock. The distance from Antigua to Guatemala City was an hour and 8 minutes ride exact, but it felt like we had spanned 12 hours worth of road, 12 hours of looking for nothing, 12 hours with Mr. Skeleton. He was becoming so determined to find Maria that he even forewent his usual amount of coffee that day, so he was a little tired and agitated when we were walking down the hallway of one elementary school that smelled of graham crackers. "Aquí," said the staff member who had escorted us. Mr. Skeleton nodded, saying gracias, and the staff member waddled away. For a moment, at the end of this graham cracker-scented hallway, Mr. Skeleton and I convened outside the art classroom door. I wanted to ask him if he believed that this could be her, but I encased myself in an anxious silence while he got a cigar out from the inside of his suit jacket. I didn't have to query. I knew there were only 2 smells that he had an affinity for: coffee and brown tobacco leaves. The smell of graham crackers was too alien to him, and he needed the taste of the atmosphere that he was privy to. He lit it with a match that he struck on the cuff of his sleeve. I have to admit, I was a little thankful when a cloud of smoke punched me in the face with its fragrant fist dissolving over my skin. He knocked, but the door squeaked open to reveal a colorful room full of tables of little kids, maybe 7 to 8 years old, all of them coloring on pieces of paper. There were posters of babyish cartoons on the wall. There was a whiteboard with Spanish written on, Spanish that I could just barely understand, and there was a woman at the head of the class with a lanyard on her neck with an ID on it. "Esta Maria aquí," Mr. Skeleton boomed as best he could in his nasally voice. This woman was blonde with brown eyes and pink lips. Her skin was somewhere in between the yellow of the Arch of Santa Catalina and the white colonial buildings, a cathedral alabaster beige. She was in a red shirt with long sleeves and black khaki pants. She looked shocked that someone had said her name. I felt suddenly embarrassed. Of course, a language that I struggled to understand belonged to this woman. And of course, the language was a shared secret between mysterious people like Mr. Skeleton and beautiful people like Maria. But a woman's beauty takes on a sudden tragedy when it itself has brought on unwarranted attention. Maria blamed herself. I saw it in her eyes, and it made me feel guilty for finding her beautiful. With his cigar tucked neatly in his fist, Mr. Skeleton gestured over to one of the tables of little kids. "Cillian, go practice your Spanish," he said. "But we've come so far. I want to know what she has to say." "Cillian." I walked shamefully over to the table of kids, plopped down in a chair that I barely fit into, and tried asking the students what they were drawing in Spanish. They shrieked triumphantly when I asked this, and I somewhat could understand their excited answers. I regretted this, though, because it stopped me from being able to eavesdrop on Mr. Skeleton and Maria. I looked over my shoulder and saw, judging by the look on Maria's face, that Mr. Skeleton had given her the rundown. I felt a tug on my sleeve, and I snapped around. "Eres americano?" asked the little girl, bashfully. I found my own Mr. Skeleton myself, and answered the question with the bravado of answering a riddle. "Si." The little girl lit up as if I was some sort of astronaut, and I felt bad for having found the graham cracker smell from earlier a little icky. "And I need you to tell me where he is," I heard Mr. Skeleton saying from over my shoulder. Her voice, her accent, it broke my heart, and I don't know why. I don't know. Do you have any inclination as to where?" "He kept texting my number, telling me to meet him underneath the Arco de Santa Catalina." "Why there?" "He said that was our spot," she explained. "He said that was our spot because of one of our first conversations over text was me showing him pictures of Guatemala, and one of them was the Arco de Santa Catalina." Mr. Skeleton became a little stern, and I looked over my shoulder to see him leaning in towards Maria, just enough for a shadow to mask his face below his brow. "Let me ask you, did you any way give my grandson the impression that you liked him back? I never thought skin like hers would be able to freeze, but it did for a moment. Her cheeks in the opposite of a sunburn. I was pretty clear. I was too old for him." Mr. Skeleton repeated the question. "There were times I called him cute. Really, that was all," she explained. "We sent selfies back and forth, that was all. I never planned for him to do this." "Well, he did," Mr. Skeleton griped. "But Maria, I want you to know that I am not agitated at you. This is not your fault. My grandson just has a wild heart." "Wild like a horse," she agreed, and I thought I heard a hint of admiration in her voice when she said this. "Well, there's no more room for wild horses left inside the world. They have to be bridled," Mr. Skeleton said, trying his best not to snarl. "Have a suck of your cigar, Mr. Skeleton, quick," I thought to myself. She doesn't deserve this. "You never deserved this," he said before taking a long-awaited drag on his cigar. "Is Kenny okay?" "We don't know. That is why I came looking for you." "Who's the boy?" "A student I found in Antigua," answered Mr. Skeleton, and I finally accepted into his pirate crew. He's helping me to find Kenny, and I'm helping him to learn Spanish. Buen, she said. I hope we didn't interrupt your class. No. Can I bother you for a weekend, though? ¿Qué? ¿Por qué? Because I need you as bait, underneath the Santa Catalina archway. There was a lapse in their conversation, and that pause made the conversation seem so adult. So I turned back to my fellow students, all 7 and more fluent in Spanish than me. Necesito que seas cibo, so I can bring him home and set him straight, he explained. Maria spoke in a mixture of a whine and a plea. I can't do that to him. You know how he'll cry, how he'll try to kiss me. Your grandson has beautiful eyes. I'm certain I'm too old for him, and I don't want a relationship. But I scare if I see his eyes in person, I'll give. You see my eyes? Mr. Skeleton spoke matter-of-factly. Do you really want that in 40 or 50 years? All I heard was Maria take one deep breath of horror. Not horror from Mr. Skeleton's eyes, but maybe horror from the aspect of hurting Kenny, or even worse, falling for Kenny. Oh, Mr. Skeleton griped. Oh, don't tell me you have an inkling of a crush for him. I stood up and walked away from the students, for this was becoming too interesting. Did she like him after all? He is cute, she apologized. And that's the last thing a young man needs in Guatemala, Mr. Skeleton complained. Mr. Skeleton, I butted in, my voice shaking with shyness. He'll find a girl his age, Maria said. Is 8 years really that much? I queried. Both froze and slowly turned to face me. Mr. Skeleton looking agitated and Maria looking caught red-handed. I mean, I continued, what if you two are meant for each other? I will redact myself from our little partnership, young Norton, if you do not keep out of this discourse, Mr. Skeleton snarled. But I was brave, because I had seen the arch of Santa Catalina, and its yellow color had affected me, the same way that Maria's blonde, almost yellow hair had. Cabello armillo. Maybe they're meant to meet each other for the first time ever under the arch of Santa Catalina, I mused. This Saturday. Text him. Tell him to meet you underneath the arch of Santa Catalina this Saturday. Maria. His eyes, she said, retreating into herself helplessly. What power will they have in person? There was a pause before Mr. Skeleton came to the plainest of conclusions. If he had a hat, he would have been putting it on in that moment. Just text him to meet you under the archway on Saturday morning. You don't even have to show up. We'll catch him. I'll talk some sense into him, and you'll never have to worry about him again. What's the big deal, Mr. Skeleton? I asked as we walked down the graham cracker-scented hall again. You ever see a pair of eyes in love, Kenny? Was all that he said. I hope she does what we told her. The last thing we need is the budding of some great love story underneath the arch of Santa Catalina. Again, I didn't correct him, for there was a flash of something in his eyes that rejuvenated his very humanity. If everybody was Kenny to him, I think he'd be the happiest man in the world. And I began to wonder if his default agitation was caused by a sense of Kenny, his grandson Kendrick, being gone. We had enough days from then to Saturday to plan it. We went over it in my dorm between lessons while Mr. Skeleton was polluting his mouth and smoking only as if to keep himself from becoming Mr. Living Human Being. He was very lively that way. So the day came, and Mr. Skeleton and I got into our respective positions. He reading a newspaper at a little table that seemed to be made of rusted chicken wire on one side of Fifth Avenue North, and me simply standing on the adjacent side. I was positioned by the aged white building that was overgrown with leafy vines, while his table was outside of one of the brilliant, sunset-colored buildings. This time he wore a small, cream-colored fedora that matched his suit, and also visored the upper half of his face. He had told me that I would be able to recognize Kenny, even though I had never seen him. He, and I quote, said, "The romantic desperation that makes a man's eye sockets red is unmistakable." This quote I thought of while looking over and watching Mr. Skeleton read his paper. Then I saw him. I knew it was him, for he bore resemblance to his grandfather. He was a little more filled out, not as skinny. You could say that he wasn't Mr. Skeleton yet, but he had an expression that suggested he saw his future. He wore an indigo suit, an odd choice for the heat of Guatemala, and the suit had some thin white stripes going vertically. His dirty blonde hair was combed back and kept there by some wet gel. Mr. Skeleton had been right about the apricot red eye sockets. He was freshly shaved, and his face in the impression of romantic doom, as if his fate was waiting to relax in the mode of a kiss. Watching him come down the avenue made me feel like I knew that the man was a werewolf, and that none of the tourists or locals knew this but Mr. Skeleton and I. I looked around. Maria was nowhere to be seen. I happened to make eye contact with Mr. Skeleton, who shot a warning at me with his eyes. He froze, holding his head like a guillotine that I was waiting to see drop into a nod. Waiting as Kendrick strode down Fifth Avenue North towards the mouth of the Arch of Santa Catalina. He was looking around, probably in search of Maria. He came under the archway, consumed by its shadow. I looked at Mr. Skeleton, but he didn't give the signal yet. I felt myself becoming antsy. Kendrick passed us, continuing down Fifth Avenue North, and Mr. Skeleton never gave his nod. I hurried across the avenue towards Mr. Skeleton when Kendrick had passed. "Why'd we let him go?" I hissed. "Easy now," he rebutted. "Was that him?" I asked hurriedly. "It was." "Why'd we let him go? Why didn't you give the signal?" Mr. Skeleton looked up, squinting to block out the sun that came off the arch. "Must be something about the Santa Catalina Arch." "Should I call his name?" "No." He gruffed. He struggled to say my name. Cillian. "Kenny!" a woman shouted. Mr. Skeleton and I turned around. Maria was standing where Kendrick had passed. She was in a black dress with her yellow hair in curls at the end, wild in length. Him and I then looked down the other end of the avenue and saw the young man in the indigo suit slowly turn around. Mr. Skeleton was too enchanted to hide his face behind his newspaper again. I was enchanted as well. The aforementioned Kendrick showed his face, and suddenly a temporal current was in transit on the cobblestones of Fifth Avenue North. Kendrick looked from Maria to Mr. Skeleton and I, and back to Maria again. "Grandpa?" he shouted, not caring if his shout would upset the other people on the avenue or not. Mr. Skeleton was still too enchanted to speak. Kendrick tilted his head, waiting. "He's okay," I heard Mr. Skeleton murmur. "Kenny!" Maria shouted, freeing the name from Mr. Skeleton's bosom. She held up her hand. Kendrick started walking forward, either to us or Maria, I wasn't sure, but he walked past and into Maria's arms. Mr. Skeleton and I turned and saw the two embrace beneath the Santa Catalina arch. We watched how they fit into each other with the grace of swans, he being slightly taller and looking down at her, and she craning her neck and giving her brown eyes. They kissed. "What changed her mind?" Mr. Skeleton murmured. "Should we ask her?" "No. Let them be for now." We did so, and the couple respected our polite patience when their kiss and embrace ended. Kendrick looked over his shoulder, looking as though he had just found his escape on the caboose of some train. "What are you doing here, Grandpa?" he asked. Maria opened up her mouth, but Mr. Skeleton spoke before she could. "Oh, I'm a tutor now," he said. "My pupil and I were just reveling in the marvelousness of the Santa Catalina Arch." I was speechless. Kendrick looked up at the ribcage of the archway and said, out of breath from his kiss with Maria, "It is kind of marvelous, isn't it?" All that Mr. Skeleton did was finally give the signal and nod, but it was far too late by now. "I'll call the family, Kenny. Tell them you're great." "I'm more than great," he said with a smile. "Hey, do you want to catch up sometime?" "I know a great cafe with a great cheesecake," Mr. Skeleton said, more so controlling a sense of charm than of agitation now. "Shall you two talk?" Maria asked Kendrick. Kendrick looked at his grandfather, who gave a dismissing nod. "Go on," Mr. Skeleton said. "You'll know where to find me." With that, Mr. Skeleton and I watched the unlikely couple walk down the avenue, given permission to pass by the archway. Why'd we let him go? I asked when they were far enough away. Because, as foolish as my grandson is, he's in love, Cillian. Let the fools run loose. They might do something interesting. I blinked, watching the couple diminish in the distance like far-off figures in an impressionist painting. Do me a favor, Cillian, Mr. Skeleton said, folding the newspaper and retrieving a cigar from his chest pocket. Don't spend too much time under the arch of Santa Catalina. Why? He looked up at the archway's ribcage and then back at me as he popped the cigar in his mouth. And he said, I think it gravely affects people's ability to make decisions.